All right, hello everybody. Every single year, I do it on X, Twitter, whatever the hell you want to call it. I post my results each and every year, win or lose. And throughout the years, I gotta say I've been incredibly fortunate to only have one losing year where I lost about 1 million, another one where I broke even, and then winning years every other year. And that's difficult to do when you play tournament poker because of the nature of the game and the sample size. You know, you're talking about 100 tournaments-ish, and over 100 tournaments, you can go through really bad streaks and you can go through really good ones. So throughout my career, I've been very fortunate. And we're going to go over the results as always, and I'll just lead with it because why not? Here you go, ladies and gentlemen. Voila. This was my 2023. Wow. Whopping big old number. As you can see, we've hit the 2 million mark. So on record for, when I've been keeping track, this is going to be my worst year that I've had. So what I do at the end of a year like that is, I start to break down what exactly happened. And I know a lot of you armchair quarterbacks are going to tell me a whole bunch of reasons why, and you're wrong, most of you. Some of you may have it, but I don't really need your unsolicited advice, and I'm sure there's going to be plenty in the comments, and I promise not to read any of them. Okay? Because listen, I've been doing this for 30 years, so the person with the most insight about my results is going to be me. So I have the bird's eye view. A lot of you get to see the vlogs, and you see kind of a lot of the big spots, in those all-in moments, just hasn't gone my way, and a pretty crazy number, in terms of, my win percentage and all-in pots and stuff like that. So let's take a deeper look at, the numbers, if you will. So every year, you're usually going to have, if you play the high rollers, you're going to have a couple $100,000 score, 200-300 at least. I didn't have one. I didn't have any scores that were over 100. I think I only had 2 scores over 100K, and one of them was in a 50K buy-in. So really just missed out late, deep in a lot of tournaments. Because if you look at the number of cashes, and percentage-wise, I played 145 events this year, which, as you can see, is way up. That's the most events I've played in a single year, ever, pretty much, or since I was much younger. And you can take a look here at sort of the progression, year to year. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but when you look at the cash percentage, just for the record, I do this wrong, if you will. I don't do it per bullet, so the number's going to be inflated. Where it says something like 25%-ish in cashes. That number's inflated because I just count the entire tournament. So if I spent 2 bullets in a tournament I cashed, I consider it 1 for 1 rather than per bullet. So the actual cash percentage is going to be lower than what you see here because there are rebuys throughout. Okay, got into a little bit of nitty gritty there, but let's start off the top with sort of my notes on my own year and what went right, what went wrong. And this is kind of how I coach myself. It's how I coach other people. Whatever it is, whether it's a tournament or a year or whatever you're doing, at the end of it, simple coaching triangle. What worked? What didn't work, right? Forget about the result, You look at the result that occurred, and then you sort of work backward and say, okay, what are some of the things that I did that worked really well? And what are some of the things that maybe I can change and improve upon? The first thing, I came into the year, remember, I had a year saving, if you will, win in the Super High Roller Bowl, which banked me $3.3 million in December of 2022, and I was high on the victory because I came in there with some significant exploits. I was using limpin' as pimpin'. I was doing a lot of things size-wise to really mess with my opponents, and it worked flawlessly. I went almost wire to wire in that one after, of course, hitting that crazy hand against Bryn Kinney, where he had aces full and I hit runner quads, which was nice. And it's funny because I didn't even have the nuts. A straight flush was possible there. So yeah, after that propelled me there. And I came into the year a little bit too, what's the word? High on my britches, just feeling too good probably about where I sit. And what that led to was me sort of coming in and being nonchalant, not caring as much. Because I went from, 300K buy-in, winning 3.3 million, to playing some 10K buy-in tournaments, right? And ultimately, I found myself not really caring as much about each bullet, rebuying too much, being sloppy. I remember a PLO tournament at the Win early on where I was just braising dark and doing stupid stuff, not caring as much. Because just, again, that's part of what's called winner's tilt. People think about tilt, and they always think about, well, when you're losing, you tilt. But sometimes when you've won or you're winning too much, you get sloppy and you start to play poorly as a result. And that was kind of what was happening with a lot of the bullets, right? We're just gambling too much and being goofy and not caring enough, right? Because again, the money isn't life-changing for me in a 10K, but I care about winning and I care about putting up good results year in and year out. And when you start off the year being loosey-goosey, if you will, playing sloppy, you can dig yourself a big hole that you don't necessarily get to just get out of by winning the Super High Roller Bowl at the end of the year. Okay, so that's number one, was winner's tilt. That's what I came into the year with. Number two, now this is a big one. This is going to affect what we talk about going forward to 2024. Number two is I played too many tournaments. Again, if you look, that was 145 events compared to 107 the year before, and then less and less even before that, all the way down to like 60 events in 2018, I believe. So just by sheer numbers, I was playing far too often. Part of the reason for that was I sort of made the mistake of making a couple side bets, and they weren't even that big or that important, but made a couple side bets on PokerGo Tour points, against basically the only biters I got was Alex Fox and Kerry Katz. And Kerry actually, midway through the year, he was burnt out. He canceled his bet. So really all I lost was a small peanut to Alex Fox and on that. But what it did was it had me playing in the studio a ton, right? Normally my schedule is World Series of Poker heavy. June, July, I'm playing pretty much every day. But outside of that, not so much. This year, my God, there was just a lot of poker being played. After the World Series, I usually take my 6 weeks to get back into shape. But we had, I think it was Poker Masters, US Poker Open, Super High Roller Bowl, the PLO Series, the Mixed Game Series, the PLO Super High Roller. Boom, boom, boom. Right after me playing online on GG Poker, streaming it. So I was putting in essentially another World Series of Poker-like effort, not too far after, about 4 weeks after. And that doesn't bode well for me. And the reason is this. Generally speaking, when I play too many tournaments, it leads to, well, listen, I'm older, so it leads to some fatigue for sure, which leads to some weaker plays, just not as focused and things like that. But it also leads to some sloppiness where you just don't care enough about each bullet and, as much as you should. So I do my best when I really want to play. Not when I feel like, oh my God, I got to go play. Or I just, and when you're in one of these series and you're playing, Player of the Year stuff, which we're going to get into later, which is going to be a big shocker to you, you're sort of forced in to play, right? You don't just not play. Even if you don't feel it, you're having an off day, you still go in there. And when I'm doing that, I simply am not as successful, period. And I don't know that anybody is, but for me, I think it's pretty significant. So that's number two, playing too many tournaments. Now, number three, and you're going to say, oh, Daniel, you're just whining, but facts are facts, okay? Bad luck in the wrong spots, okay? If you look at the number of caches, I think I had 39 caches, okay? And again, the biggest ones were like 120,000. Now, part of it was, some good run in especially at the World Series in the summer, in the $1,500 buy-in, 3,000 and under buy-ins. I made some crazy deep runs through thousands of players. I was consistently coming 40th, 50th. I played in the Giant, which had 23,000 players, and I finished the top 100 in that one too. So a lot of really deep runs and good run in those events that are exceptionally hard to win just by sheer numbers. So, and again, you don't get to choose when you're lucky and when you're not. But, like I said, deep runs in those, not all the way to the finish line, but cutting through a very big percentage of the fields. Now, in the high rollers, the ones that matter, the 25K and above, the 50Ks, the 250Ks, the 100Ks, nada. Did not run well in those at all, right? Lost a lot of all-in key situations, where there's flips. And we'll get to this too, but actually we'll get to it now. We'll roll right into it now. So this is the next one, essentially, the next reason. And the next reason is when you play high rollers now, because players are so much better, your edge is much smaller, which means luck is going to play a much bigger role, okay? So imagine you have a really, really big edge against an opponent. Well, it doesn't really matter what the cards are all that much, right? Because you're just going to beat them, in the trenches, if you will. But when you play in these high rollers, especially some of them are turbo-y structures, they're really fast, you need to win these all-ins. Sometimes people look like a hero and they're like, wow, he must be the best in the world right now. And I can tell you that player is probably playing well as a result of running well, but to correlate that result, it's so highly unlikely that the number one predictor of why is luck. Okay? Because every high roller you watch, you see a guy with ace queen against two jacks. Okay? And then the winner of that hand has a big stack and the other one goes home. And the winner is a hero and the guy who lost, he's the dummy? No. And especially if you go through long stretches. And this year, as you saw, obviously, it's been very bizarre. But when you look at the bigger scope of things, and I think if you're an online poker player, you can probably relate to this more than anybody, and you look at sample sizes. Online players play so many more events than the average, and they'll see crazy swings where they're like down a significant number of buy-ins, over stretches. And like I said, for most of my career, I've never really had any crazy bad runs like that in terms of numbers. And in this year, again, I do gear up for the big events, so I don't think quote unquote playing too many tournaments was the problem. I think ultimately, you need to run better now because the players are good, if that makes sense. So maybe in 2004, even if I didn't run very well, it wouldn't matter because I'm not forced to force errors, okay? In 2004, I was just able to wait for people to make big mistakes, essentially. And I had a system that was very careful and secure. Today, you have to force some errors now, a little bit. You have to push the envelope. You have to fight in the trenches. If you don't, you get anviled. And I look, again, I go through my checklist every year. Number one, am I getting it in bad often? Well, we know that's not the case. Almost every time I'm all in, if you see, I'm usually ahead. Like almost always, either at a coin flip occasionally or like 2-1 favorite or better. Very rarely am I getting it in worse than that. So that's number one. Number two, am I paying off too much on rivers, where I'm just getting sloppy and paying it off and losing my slips? That's not been happening either. Then the third part is, maybe am I getting too short? People all comments like, oh, you keep getting short stacked. When you watch the vlogs, what you're watching is you're just watching the all-ins, right? And those all-ins typically are for an average, like I have an average stack, playing for heaps and then losing it or something like that. So it's not that either, right? So that's what makes me feel good about it. I do know, that focus in sloppiness and a lot of the smaller buy-ins is something that I got to clean up. And again, I'm going to get to what my plan is there. So let's switch to that now. So 2024, what is going to change for Daniel Negreanu? Well, first of all, I'm going to run better. That's already decided, right? Okay, let's knock on the poker gods' heads or whatever like that. But okay, so we're going to have a few different approaches in terms of what I'm going to do in 2024. And I haven't laid out my entire schedule yet, but most likely, we're looking at the World Series in full, as always. Looking at World Series Paradise. Hopefully that happens again. That was a blast in the Bahamas. The GG Series online, after the World Series. And then possibly maybe like Jeju. I'm looking at a Triton Series. I haven't played one yet. Really looking forward to playing in Triton. So here's some of the ideas after the year that I've sort of come up with for myself in terms of what I'm going to do. Number one, and this one really comes from, it's like I did this once in the Bahamas where I didn't rebuy in an event. And I just said, you know what? I don't feel like playing it. I'm just going to go to bed. And then I didn't, came back the next day, played a big one, played very, very well. I believe it was a 25K GG Millions. I got really deep. I cashed in that one. And again, I thought got unlucky in that one, but whatever. We're not talking about that anymore. That's 2023 stuff. 2024, whatever. We just win all in. So number one, and really again, Amanda mentioned it to me. She's like, you never say I don't feel like playing and do well, right? Like you got a point. Like there's many times where I just go, I'll just play. I don't feel like playing, but I'm going to play. Doesn't usually work out, right? Yeah, sure, some of that's luck, but also some of it's just me not grinding out spots that need to be grinded out. Where you're like, shit, all right, I'll either get a stack or go home. That's not a good mentality to play tournament poker. You got to approach each and every decision, as though it's your, the most important one, if you will, right? Now, I realize we're human. We're not robots, so you're going to have moments where your focus is intensified and higher stuff, and maybe you take some moments where you need a little break from it, and that's okay, right? But there was far too much of the break from it, and there wasn't enough percentage-wise of the intensity, right? Which is required for me to be at my best. And the intensity for me looks a lot different than someone like a Phil Ivey, who's like this. For me, I'm doing that, but talking is still going to be a part of my intensity. I'm not going to become a robot or anything like that. But I will focus on number one, most importantly, don't play if I really don't feel like it. That might mean some days off here and there, even in a series. I'm not just going to force myself. Even if I'm going to race for something, which we'll get to, which just won't shock you. And I keep saying that we're going to get to it, but this will shock you. All right. Number two, don't just shrug, gamble, and rebuy. Okay? Like I said, winner's tilt started off the year for me where I was playing the PLO and just going all in dark and rebuying and being silly. Right? And it's a negative EV play. A lot of these people, they don't understand how rebuys work. Everyone thinks that it's unfair. It's unfair somehow that a guy's going to play like an idiot and just go all in blind and just be negative EV on that bullet, and it's unfair to the field. That's not true. That guy loses money doing it, I promise. And when I do it, that's not a plus EV play. Yes, it does give me a better chance to build a stack, but I'm paying double, triple, sometimes 4 times what you're paying to play in the same tournament. And again, there's no guarantees that just because I maybe win one that you're going to win. So overall, that isn't a winning strategy. So I'm going to focus more on not being silly in any tournaments where, I'm just like, go all in, rebuy. And I'll tell you this, one thing that I can promise you is anytime I sell pieces, World Series or whatever, I never do this stuff. Like, it's only with my own money when I'm like, who cares, right? When there's packages on the line or anything like that, I really try my best, But again, even in that regard, we're going to do even better this year with a few things. Number 3, and this one's simple. Stay humble and work hard, okay? So, as I said, I came into the year a little bit too big on my britches or whatever. That's a saying. I know what it is, and somebody in the comments can tell me. Is it big on your too big in my britches? I don't remember. But, it's a britches thing. There's something about britches. So I'm just going to realize that, listen, my opponents are good. I need to bring my A game. I also need to work, on different spots and making sure that not just like, you never want to be the guy. And I did this. I remember when I was like 23, 24, and I was playing the World Series, and I was in the trenches. I'm grinding. I'm Mr. T, Clubber Lang. And I'm watching, and I won't name them, but there's older guys that are pros, world champs, and I'm like, they're babbling about how bad these young guys are and how aggressive they are. And I'm thinking, you guys suck, okay? You just don't see it. You don't know yet how much better I am already than you. And I never wanted to allow myself to be that guy, and I won't, right? So the humility comes from just respect for what the younger generation is doing and not poo-pooing and go, Solver says this, Solver says that. Listen, I'm always going to exploit people. That's always going to be a part of, the fabric of what makes me good at what I do. But that doesn't mean that I throw theory out the window, right? You have to continue to stay up to date and put in the work, along with staying humble. And sometimes that means, asking for help, some other people that are, in the trenches. Like, I've never been a computer nerd or whatever. I did learn to work with solvers and things like that, but that was never my bread and butter. So, to help me in that regard, that's something that, I want to be cognizant of, right? And we've gone over this many times, but if you're going to deviate from the norm or from a GTO line, first and foremost, you have to know what the damn line was. Because if you're not, you're just guessing, right? So when I see somebody over bluffing in a spot, well, how do I know they're over bluffing, right? The only way to know that is to know what is the optimal percentage they should be bluffing, or what types of hands should they not be bluffing with, et cetera, et cetera. So unless you know that stuff, when you do know that stuff and have a deeper understanding for the baselines, now you can be a much more effective poker player. All right, this is the big one, okay? This is the big one. All right. So, World Series of Poker Player of the Year is incredibly important to me, right? I've won it twice. And, I sort of I won it 3 times, really. And then 4 days later found out that no, Robert Campbell won. So, it was the first to 3. They took one away. Such is life. Ding. So this year, and I'll tell you why. I am not going to focus on WSOP Player of the Year this year. Not going to do it. What? That's a big thing for you, blah, blah, blah. Here's the thing. Okay, the system is broken. And it has been broken for a very long time. And you see that. You've seen that in the vlogs in 2019 where we're running around, dropping stacks, rebuying, being sloppy, all in, all this stuff, just to chase a title that is for no money. So all these players, like the Deebs of the world, and everybody were burning money, equity, to win this, picture on your wall type thing, right? And then also the biggest thing is you're also forced to play the online events while you're playing live. And sometimes there's 2 of them. I remember specifically being in the 10K short deck, which I really wanted to be in, and I enjoy the game. But one of the keys about that game is you really got to focus and pay attention. How people are checking, who's interested, who's not. Because there's a lot of little stealing that should be going on. Well, I'm missing everything because I got 2 online tournaments that I'm trying to play here. Just, I can't do it. Maybe some of you are. The Jesse Lonuses, shout out Jesse. The Sean Deebs, maybe they feel like, they're able to balance that. I know after year, that's dividing my focus like that does not bode well. So, yeah, and again, the system itself, it's very, very broken. It's too heavily related to volume, number of caches, all this kind of stuff. So it's all about quantity over quality. And that's going to be a flip in 2024. We are going to focus on quality over quantity. The number of events I'm going to be playing is going to go down, right? That means the chances of me winning World Series Poker Player of the Year also go down. But obviously, if I'm more focused on the events that I do play, likely going to be the higher buy-in stuff. So you won't see me most likely playing the $300 Gladiator in 2024. You're going to see me playing, the shorter field, high buy-in events, and might mean some World Series of Poker vlogs where it's just me taking a day off with Amanda at home because I don't feel like playing that day. I want to gear up for the events that matter most, and those are going to be, the high buy-in, smaller field events. So with that, if you take a look, I don't know when you put this in, but this is the year. So we're still up. The last couple of years we haven't made any money. The last 2 years, I had a rough 2002 until the big Super High Roller Bowl win. So it's been about 2 years of these weird situations. So I look at it and I say, okay, well, big part of it is luck, but also there's things I can do better. I can increase my focus on what matters, and that's going to be the bottom line in 2024, which is focusing on, and I'm probably going to do the packages thing. And again, no markup, but obviously you're like, why the hell would you charge markup? You lost this year, buddy. I don't want a piece of you. Well, then don't buy a piece, But I'm very confident in myself. As I said, only two caches that were like 100K plus. That's really rare. I don't think that's happened to me. I mean, we can look at the Hendon Mob, but I can't remember a year where that, probably like the late 90s or something, where I've had, just a void of all those. So I'm sure a lot of you listened to everything I said, and you're going to tell me that I'm wrong, right? And that I don't know what I'm talking about, and that you know better than me. And I guess, what's the word? All the best to you and your family is what I usually say to people. I really genuinely am not looking for unsolicited advice, because I find it nauseating, to be honest, to a certain degree. And I see it on social all the time, and I, for the most part, ignore it. But sometimes I'm like, oh my God, are you watching what's going on? Anyway, I do feel there were moments in 2023 where I played some of my absolute best poker. So my A game was elevated to a degree it's never been, but the complacency because of number of events was also weaker than my baseline, right? So if you give yourself a grade of A to F in terms of what you play like, and like a B or a B minus or a C is just, your middle of the road. I played a lot more A, like really high end stuff, some A plus stuff, but there was too much D minus. There was too much D minus in there. So we're going to try to eliminate the D minus, focus more on, A plus efforts in 2024. And this is what holding yourself accountable looks like, okay? I could easily just I could lie, right? And say, oh no, yeah, I didn't win. Or B, I could just not share this with you. But then that wouldn't be authentic and real, right? I'm not just going to share my winning years. I'm going to share my losing years. So when I see this number, it just motivates me. It lights a fire under my butt. Like I said, 2024, look out, because D-Negs is coming for you. Peace.